Hey, the world got a new pope this week, and it's reminding me of a early 1600s Ashkenazi Jewish dystopian fairy tale. So let me tell you this story from a collection of Yiddish stories from Basel, Central Europe, in 1602, called the Mayse book. The Mayse book has almost 300 little stories in it. Some are based on religious texts, others are just little morality tales, but one of them is called The Jewish Pope. And in this story, there's a little boy, Elhanan, and basically I won't go into all the details, but a Christian servant, while his family is away at synagogue on Sabbath, a Christian servant takes a little boy and secretly baptizes him and then runs away with him and gives him to a convent where he is raised a Christian, and he becomes a great scholar. And it says that he went from one university to another till he arrived in Rome, and he became a cardinal in Rome, and his fame was so great that people couldn't praise him enough, and he was greatly respected and also very handsome. So that's a direct quote. And then because of his popularity and his genius, he becomes elected pope. He realizes somewhere along the way, he knows that he's Jewish, but his life is really good. He's had an education, he's pope, and he's able to do like really good things for the Jews in Rome. And so he stays in his situation, but then he really wants to see his father again. And somehow he knows that the only way he'll get to see his father is if he, as Pope, makes this decree, a really oppressive decree against the Jews of Mainz, which is where he was born, where his family still lived. He would put out a decree saying that the Jews couldn't circumcise their children, that they couldn't practice Sabbath, really serious things that they would have no choice but to appeal to the church leadership to change. And so he does this. And just as he guesses, his dad is, being the most respected person in the community, is the one sent to Rome to try to straighten things out. And when they get to Rome and they see the Jewish community in Rome, they tell the Roman Jews what happened. It says they were greatly surprised because they said that since time immemorial, they had never had a better pope for Jews. For he couldn't live without Jews and always had Jews around him secretly, and they had to play chess with him. Nor had they heard anything about the dreadful decree. And they couldn't believe that the Pope actually wrote a decree like that. So basically, the dad comes and appeals to the Pope, and the Pope says, you've got to play chess with me, and then we'll figure this out. And they have this kind of head-to-head. They talk about religion. They play chess. And then finally, the Pope asks everybody to leave. He starts crying, and he wraps his arms around his dad, and he said, "Dear old father, don't you recognize me?" Elhanan says he's going to cancel the edict, the oppressive edict to the Jews in Mainz, and he wants to leave Rome and go back to Mainz and live as a Jew again and reunite with his family. But he says, before I do that, I'm going to do one last thing. He says, I'm going to write a really strong argument against Christianity and against the church, and I'm going to leave it in Rome and leave a papal ruling that says every new person who becomes pope has to read this when they become pope. And then nobody in Rome knew what became of him, but he went back to Mainz and lived as a respectable Jew. And that's the story. So kind of a quirky story, and a little bit of Joseph in Egypt calling his brothers after doing an oppressive thing and revealing himself. Also a little bit prescient for the movie Conclave. I won't give any spoilers, but I did think it was really good. But just a little more backstory on this story. I mentioned it was in this collection of Yiddish stories from 1602 from Central Europe, but it takes place in Mainz, which was a really significant Jewish community and an area that experienced a lot of persecution against the Jews throughout the Middle Ages, particularly during the Crusades. And so the First Crusade in 1096, as the Crusaders were leaving France and Western Europe and on their way to the Holy Land, ostensibly to help the Byzantine Empire against the Turks, but really just to try to take over, and that's what ended up happening. With all their religious fervor, as they went towards the Holy Land, they targeted the religious other that they encountered, which were the Jewish communities, the Ashkenazi Jewish communities. So places like Mainz had really heavy persecution. The Crusaders tried to force conversions. In some cases, they just massacred them if they didn't comply. So there were forced baptisms, things that we see in this story. And so I think the story is kind of amazing because it's sort of, like I said, the dystopian. What would happen if actually all these horrible things done against us, we got to be in charge and use the very process that oppressed us to make things better from the inside, and kind of stick it to them at the end. I know that there's been a lot of scholarship on the Mayse book, and I'm not really an expert here, but I did just want to share this story because I think it's kind of cool, and it just felt timely, as it were.